The 1960 Winter Olympics was a winter multi-sport event held between February 18 to 28, 1960 in Squaw Valley, California, United States. Squaw Valley was chosen to host the Games at the 1956 meeting of the International Olympic Committee. It was an undeveloped resort in 1955, so from 1956 to 1960 the infrastructure and all of the venues were built at a cost of $80 million. It was designed to be intimate, allowing spectators and competitors to walk to nearly all the venues. Squaw Valley hosted athletes from 30 nations who competed in 4 sports and 27 events. Women's speed skating and biathlon made their Olympic debuts. The organizers decided the bobsled events did not warrant the cost to build a venue, so for the first and only time bobsled was not on the Winter Olympic program. The Soviet Union dominated the medal count, winning 21 medals, 7 of which were gold. Soviet speed skaters Yevgeny Grishin and Lydia Skoblikova won 2 gold medals each. Swedish cross-country skier Sixten Jernberg added her gold and silver to the 4 medals he won at the 1956 Winter Games. Cold War politics forced the IOC to debate the participation of China, Taiwan, North Korea and East Germany. In 1957, the United States government threatened to deny visas to athletes from communist countries. The IOC responded with a threat to revoke Squaw Valley's right to host the 1960 Games. The United States conceded and allowed entry to athletes from communist countries. Host city selection. Squaw Valley was a struggling ski resort with minimal facilities, which made its selection to host the 1960 Winter Olympics a surprise. Wayne Paulsen and Alexander Cushing, who were inspired to an Olympic bid by a newspaper article mentioning that Reno, Nevada and Anchorage, Alaska had expressed interest in the Games. Knight's administration agreed and recommended that the California legislature appropriate $1 million to the effort. Based on the financial support received from the state of California, the United States Olympic Committee approved the bid on January 7, 1955. Cushing and the USOC received a resolution passed by the United States Congress and signed by President Dwight Eisenhower, calling on the International Olympic Committee to consider Squaw Valley's bid for the 1960 Games. Preliminary reports were drafted and submitted to the IOC, which was considering bids from Innsbruck, Austria, St. Moritz, Switzerland and Chamonix, France. Squaw Valley was provisionally awarded the right to host the Games, but IOC President Avery Brundage warned the organizing committee that unless more funds were secured by April 1956, the bid would be awarded to Innsbruck. Another $4 million were committed by the state legislature, which met Brundage's requirements. On April 4, 1956, the right to host the 1960 Winter Olympics was officially awarded to Squaw Valley. Competitors and officials from European nations were angered by the selection. They felt that the alpine ski courses were not up to specifications, and that the altitude would prove too stressful on the athletes. Organization. Squaw Valley in 1956 consisted of 1 chairlift, 2 rope tows, and a 50-room lodge. Cushing presented the site as a blank canvas of unspoiled environment, where a world-class ski resort could be constructed. The obscurity of the location was underscored at the closing ceremonies of the 1956 Winter Olympics. Traditionally, the mayor of the current host city passes a flag to the mayor of the next host city, signaling the transfer of the Games. Since Squaw Valley was an unincorporated village, it had no city government. John Garland, an IOC member from California, was asked to stand in and receive the flag from the mayor of Cortina d'Ampezzo. After winning the right to host the Games, the California Olympic Commission was formed. They were given 4 years to build venues, an Olympic village, and expand infrastructure. With the expansion of roads, bridges, water and electrical capacity, the resort of Squaw Valley became the city of Squaw Valley. Hotels, restaurants, administration buildings, A sheriff's office and a sewage pumping and treatment plant were all constructed to support the influx of visitors for the Games. Organizers wanted the Olympics to be intimate with the venues close to one another. One venue deemed impractical to build was the bobsled run. Organizers felt the lack of possible entrance and the high cost of building the run were sufficient deterrents to leave the bobsled events off the 1960 Olympic program. Several design innovations and new technologies were used for the 1960 Games. The speed skating, figure skating and ice hockey events were held on artificial ice for the first time in Olympic history. A refrigeration plant capable of heating 4,800 homes had to be built to generate and maintain the ice. The heat generated from the refrigeration plant was used to warm spectators, provide hot water, and melt the snow off of roofs. New timing equipment provided by Longines was installed that used a quartz clock to measure to the hundredths of a second. IBM provided a computer that was capable of tabulating results and printing them in English and French. Blythe Arena, site of the opening and closing ceremonies as well as the figure skating and ice hockey competitions, was built with a 22-in gap in the roof, which would slide closed as the cables supporting the roof contracted during cold weather. Funding for Cushing's initial bid to the IOC came from the California legislature and investors in the Squaw Valley Development Company, who were owners of the existing resort. To fund the construction, organizers turned to the federal government, which provided about a quarter of the $80 million required to host the Games. The monies were used to build sports arenas and provide military support during the Games. Further funding was secured from private sponsorships and from the state of California. Governor Knight and his successor Edmund "Pat" Brown remained behind the project, seeing it as a means to showcase the state of California to the world. Television was not new to the Olympic Winter Games. Broadcasts of events to European audiences had begun in 1956. What was unprecedented was the sale of exclusive United States television rights to broadcast the Games. The organizing committee decided to sell the television broadcast rights to CBS for $50,000. Unknown at the time was how lucrative the sale of broadcast rights would become. For example, CBS purchased the rights to broadcast the 1960 Summer Olympics for $550,000. During the Games, CBS broadcast 15.25 hours of television focusing on ice hockey, speed skating, figure skating, alpine skiing and ski jumping. The impact of television was felt during the Games. In the men's slalom event, officials who were unsure if a skier had missed a gate asked CBS if they could review tape of the event. This request gave CBS the idea for what is now known as instant replay. Politics. Athletic competition between the Soviet Union and United States had grown intense during the 1950s. Their opposing ideologies and interests in nations such as East and West Germany, China and North and South Korea created a delicate situation as the 1960 Winter Games approached. Of particular interest was the question of whether China would be allowed to participate. Chinese athletes last competed at the 1952 Summer Games but had since withdrawn from the IOC due to a dispute over Taiwan's participation as a separate country. The United States supported Taiwan while the Soviet Union stood behind China. Given the fact that the 1960 Games were to be held in America, there was concern among IOC members that the United States would not allow China or any other communist country to participate. In 1957, IOC President Avery Brundage, himself an American, announced that if the United States refused entry to any country recognized by the IOC, then they would revoke Squaw Valley's invitation to host the Games and he would resign the presidency. Bowing to international pressure, the United States allowed athletes from communist countries to participate. China continued to demand that Taiwan be expelled from the IOC, demands that were refused until China broke off relations, ending any hope that they would participate in 1960. Problems similar to the issue with China broke out over North Korea and East Germany. Prior to the Korean War, the IOC had recognized the Olympic Committee of Korea, which was headquartered in Seoul. North Korea was not recognized as a separate country by the IOC, who maintained the existence of one Olympic committee. A unified team compromise was proposed but rejected, which meant only athletes from South Korea participated due to their prior recognition. Pressure for full recognition of East Germany continued, despite the fact that both East and West Germany had participated as a unified team in 1956. One of the conditions for a unified German team was that the athletes be represented by a neutral flag. Initially, West German officials refused to agree to this stipulation, citing the fact that the West German flag had been used at both the 1956 Winter and Summer Games. Eventually the neutral flag was adopted and a unified German team participated. Events. The Games were held from February 18 to 28. Medals were awarded in 27 events contested in 4 sports. The sport of biathlon was added to the program, as were speed skating events for women. After a poll was taken indicating that only 9 countries would send a bobsled team, the organizers determined that bobsled would be removed from the Olympic program. Despite petitions from the International Bobsleigh and Tobogganing Federation to reconsider, the organizers felt they could not justify the cost of constructing a bobsled run for 9 competing nations. It would be the only time in Winter Olympic history that the bobsled events were not held. Biathlon, ice hockey, skating, figure skating, speed skating, skiing, alpine skiing, Nordic skiing, cross-country skiing, Nordic combined ski jumping. Opening ceremonies. The chairman of the pageantry committee was Walt Disney, who was responsible for producing both the opening and closing ceremonies. He organized an opening that included 5,000 entertainers, the release of 2,000 pigeons, and a military gun salute of 8 shots, one for each of the previous Winter Olympic Games. The opening ceremonies were held on February 18, 1960 at Blythe Arena in the midst of a blizzard. The heavy snowfall caused traffic problems that delayed the ceremony by an hour. The festivities began with a sustained drum roll as the flags of each participating nation were raised on specially designed flag poles. Vice President Richard Nixon represented the United States government and declared the Games open. The Olympic cauldron was lit by Kenneth Henry, Olympic champion of the 500-meter speed skating race at the 1952 Winter Olympics in Oslo. The Olympic oath was taken by Carol Heiss on behalf of all the athletes. As the national delegations left the stadium, fireworks concluded the ceremonies. Ice hockey. The ice hockey tournament took place at Blythe Arena and the Squaw Valley Olympic skating rink. Controversy over the amateur status of some of the players overshadowed the event. Canadian Olympic officials objected to the use of professional amateurs by Eastern Bloc countries, and especially the Soviet Union. They alleged that the Soviets were giving their elite hockey players phantom jobs in the military that allowed them to play hockey full-time, which gave Soviet teams an advantage that they used to dominate Olympic hockey tournaments for nearly 30 years. This issue started coming to light during the 1960 Games and would culminate in a Canadian boycott of the Olympic hockey tournament at the 1972 Winter Olympics. The team from the United States won an improbable gold medal, defeating the favored Canadian and Soviet teams, who took silver and bronze respectively. This was the first Olympic gold medal in ice hockey for the United States, and it would mark the last time a Soviet team did not win the Olympic tournament until the United States' victory at the 1980 Winter Olympics. Cross-country skiing. There were 6 cross-country skiing races at the 1960 Olympics, 4 for men and 2 for women, all held at the McKinney Creek Cross-Country Complex. Soviet women swept the 10-kilometer race, which was the first medal sweep for the Soviets at the Winter Olympics. They were however upset by Sweden in the 3x5 km relay. Nordic countries dominated the men's competition. Swedish lumberjack Sixten Jernberg added her gold and silver to the 4 medals he won in 1956. He would add 2 golds and a bronze in 1964 to finish his Olympic career with 9 medals, which made him the most decorated Winter Olympian. Finnish skier Veikka Häkkinen added her gold, silver and bronze to the 2 golds and 2 silvers he had won in 1952 and 1956. Biathlon made its Olympic debut in 1960. The precursor to biathlon, military patrol, was on the Olympic program for the first Olympic Games in 1924. It was a demonstration sport of the 1928, 1936, and 1948 Winter Olympics, though the competition was only open to members of the armed forces. Military patrol fell out of favor in 1948 due to anti-military sentiments in the post-World War II era. Biathlon took its place and was instated as a full Olympic sport in 1960. It encompassed a 20-kilometer cross-country race with 4 shooting stations at ranges from 100 to 250 meters. KLA's Lestander from Sweden became the first Olympic champion. Antti Tavanen from Finland and Soviet Alexander Privalov placed second and third respectively. The athletes had 3 jumps on February 21, followed by a 15-kilometer cross-country race. German skier Georg Thoma became the first non-Nordic athlete to win the event. He would win bronze medal in the Nordic combined in 1964. Tormod Knutsen of Norway and Nikolai Guzakov of the Soviet Union placed second and third, respectively. Guzakov's wife, Maria Guzakova, competed in the cross-country events, winning a gold and silver. Ski jumping. There was one ski jumping event at the 1960 Games, the men's normal hill, which was held on February 28. In 1964 the competition would be expanded to include a men's large hill event. Helmut Recknagel became the first German to win the event. In 1994 he would be joined by Jens Weissflog as the only German ski jumping Olympic champions. Niilo Halonen from Finland and Austrian Otto Adolter earned the silver and bronze medals. Figure skating held at Blythe Memorial Arena. The figure skating competition took place between February 19 and 26. Though this was not the first time figure skating had been held indoors, it would never be contested outdoors again. There were 3 events: men's and women's singles and the pairs competition. In the men's event, David Jenkins, brother of 1956 Winter Olympic figure skating champion Hayes Jenkins, won the gold medal. It was his second Olympic medal, having won the bronze in 1956. Czechoslovakian Karel Divan took the silver medal, and Canadian Donald Jackson won the bronze. Carol Heiss, winner of the silver medal in 1956, became the Olympic champion in 1960. A year later she married Hayes Jenkins and starred in Snow White and the Three Stooges. Dutch skater Joeke Dijkstra took the silver medal. She would finish her amateur career with an Olympic gold medal in 1964. Barbara Ann Rolls gave the United States its 3rd figure skating medal of the competition when she took the bronze. The Soviet Union made its Olympic figure skating debut by sending 2 couples to compete in the pairs competition. The result belied the fact that Soviet skaters would soon come to dominate this event. The competition was won by the Canadian pair of Barbara Wagner and Bob Paul, who had won the last 3 world championships. The German pair Marika Kilius and Hans-Jürgen Baumler followed their recent European Championship victory with the Olympic silver medal, and the American husband and wife team of Ron and Nancy Luddington took the bronze. Speed skating. Women were allowed to compete in the Olympic speed skating competition for the first time in 1960. The Soviet Union had requested the inclusion of women's speed skating events in the program for the 1956 Games, but the request was rejected by the IOC. The issue was revisited for the 1960 Games. And since women had been competing internationally since 1936 and there was a world championship for women's speed skating, the IOC agreed to 4 events: 500, 1,000, 1,500, and 3,000 meters. Most of the events were held on the Squaw Valley Olympic skating rink, which was an outdoor skating oval, and featured artificial ice, a first for the Olympic speed skating competition. Given the altitude and the artificial ice, the rink was the fastest in the world, as evidenced by Norwegian Knut Johannessen's world record in the 10,000-meter event. At 15:46.6 he was the first skater ever to break the 16-minute barrier, and eclipse the previous world record by 46 seconds. Despite Johannessen's victory, the Soviets dominated the speed skating events, winning all but 2 of the races. Yevgeny Grishin won both the 500 and 1,500-meter races, though he shared the 1,500-meter gold medal with Norwegian rolled AAs. Lydia Skoblikova from the Soviet Union was the other double gold medalist when she won the 1,500 and 3,000-meter events. Polish skaters Helena Pilczyk and Elwira Sierocińska placed second and third in the 1,500-meter event, which were Poland's only medals of the Games. They were just the second and third Poles ever to win Winter Olympic medals. Alpine skiing. Despite the lack of facilities at Squaw Valley, the resort did have steep mountain slopes in close proximity, resulting in some of the most difficult alpine skiing courses in Olympic history. Both men and women competed in the downhill, giant slalom and slalom, with all 6 events held between February 20 and 26. The men's downhill was won by Frenchman Jean Vuarnet, who changed the sport by becoming the first Olympic champion to use metal skis. Swiss skier Roger Stobe won the giant slalom and Ernst Hinterseer from Austria was the slalom champion. German Heidi Biebel won the women's downhill. Yvonne Rueg of Switzerland won the giant slalom and Anne Hegveit from Canada won the slalom. Penny Pitou of the United States was the only multiple medal winner with 2 silvers in the downhill and giant slalom. Closing ceremonies. The Games were brought to a close on February 28 in Blythe Memorial Arena in front of 20,000 people. Flags of the participating nations were followed by the athletes who marched as a group with no national distinctions. The flag bearers made a semicircle around the rostrum and the national anthems of Greece, United States, and Austria were played as their respective flags were raised. IOC President Avery Brundage declared the Games closed, at which point the Olympic flame was extinguished. The Games concluded with the release of several thousand balloons.